Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am introducing Mini One Sheet Wonder number 9. It's been a while since I put out a new Mini One Sheet Wonder, so I'm really excited. This one came together really quickly, surprisingly enough, and it was actually inspired by a recent video. This was a sketch that I showcased as part of the new case series that I've been doing, where I both copy and share a card as well as create a clean and simple card. This was the card sketch that I copied and shared, and I found an image off of Pinterest, and it was of a card by an Etsy shop owner. And so if I can find it again, I'll link to it in the description box below. But if you watch my case video, I actually put her original card on screen and the name of her shop if you want to check that out. Okay, so the first cuts that you need to make are, I did a pencil mark 1 13/16 of an inch in from the top right edge inward and from the bottom left edge inward. And so I'm going to cut from that pencil line down to the bottom corner. That's my first cut. And then I'm going to turn this around 180 degrees. And again, from that pencil mark, I will cut and connect that with that corner at the bottom there. This cut has a lot of angles because the sketch has a lot of angles, and it's a very asymmetric design, which I really like. And so from this single sheet of 6x6, I wish I had figured this out before, because when I made that first set of cards, it would have been nice to be able to get some nice efficient cuts like these. But I figured it out now, so now I'll always be able to replicate this. Now, the next cut, what you'll want to do is, I have right now this panel, this trapezoid panel here, that was originally the top, originally the bottom. You want to rotate this 90 degrees counterclockwise. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut from that, that edge, that angled edge. And what I'm going to do is from the corner, what is now the top left corner, I'm going to measure inwards 2 9/16 of an inch. 2 9/16 of an inch. I know there's lots of 16ths of an inch, and I know not everybody is a fan, but there's a little bit of wiggle room here, because technically it should be 1/32 of an inch, like more than 2 9/16. But I thought maybe that would be getting a little bit too granular. So I've kept it at 2 9/16. So just a smidge more than 2.5. And what you want to do, the actual measurement here, there's some wiggle room because this is a very asymmetric design. It's pretty forgiving. So that part isn't as important as getting a 90-degree cut. So you want to make a cut that's 90 degrees from what is now oriented, or was a moment ago, as the top edge here. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up my edge here along the lines that are on my guillotine. Now remember, this was that edge that we just cut off. So so we've turned it, and now I'm gonna make a 90-degree cut with the corner being roughly 2 9/16 of an inch inwards. So that's going to be my third cut. And once you make this cut, you can see I'm really, hesitant here, but once you make that cut, you'll have these two pieces that are roughly they're not gonna be identical, and that's okay. You can see I'm a little bit off, and that's what I mean, that like if you had nudged it over just a smidge, then it would be identical, but it's okay that it's not. The sketches will work just fine. But these are pretty much identical, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my next cut through both layers at the same time. And just to make it a little bit easier so that I don't have to really firmly hold them down, I'm going to tape them together along the two edges here. That helps to kind of keep them together so that they don't slip as I'm cutting through them. And so then my next cut, this one's the easiest cut of all. What you want to do is you want to take what used to be the top edge of your top or the bottom edge of your pattern paper, and you just want to measure 1¼ inch inward. And again, the measurement isn't quite as important as it is to get a 90-degree cut from what was your top and bottom edge. So again, I've rotated this again now so that what I'm lining up straight with the lines on my guillotine, that used to be the top edge, and I've just put that corner so that it is 1¼ inch inward, and I've made a cut. So I'm gonna put all these pieces back together so that you can actually see where they all came from. And I definitely recommend, I always recommend using non-directional papers, but I definitely recommend it in this case, at least for the first time that you cut this, so that you can kind of see where all the pieces come from and how they're going to get used. So I'm going to put everything back together here so that you can kind of see where the pieces originated. And it's really fabulous. There's so many different angles, but it all is going to work out great on your sketch, even if you haven't hit those very, very precise measurements. So if you have the printable, I have all of those measurements out, on the cutting guide so that you can follow along and make your cuts. But this video is going to be free for everybody, always available on my channel. So feel free to watch this again, watch me cut through those. Again, you've got all of the measurements in this video to replicate these cuts. So don't worry about having to buy the printable. It's available on my website. If you're not a channel member, you can always buy these. And if you are a channel member, for my lowest level channel membership, which is the Crafty Friend level at 99 cents, you always have the most current mini one sheet wonder available to you for free. So at the moment, that will be this one. When number 10 comes out, this will no longer be available, and you will have access to number 10. For my Love You a Latte channel members and higher, you have access to the full past archive. And so those you'll always have. Just check your membership tab and there'll be links to where you can download this if you are a channel member. Okay, so now this next section of my video will be putting together the 4 sketches that you can make from these cuts that we've just made. And so in this first sketch, I'm using one of the larger trapezoid, kind of like an irregular trapezoid piece. And I've used that on the A side of my pattern paper. And for the opposite trapezoid in this sketch, I've just used some solid color cardstock. So I've only used one piece here, and I've supplemented it with some solid color cardstock. Now in my second sketch, it's going to be a very similar but not identical to this first one. It's almost kind of like the reverse, really, but I've used different trapezoids, because all of your trapezoids, you're gonna have two that are large and then two that are small, and you can orient them in a lot of different ways just to get some different looks. So for this one, what I've chosen to do is on the opposite side of this this sketch, where I've used the B side of the original 6x6 I cut down, I am going to add another piece of patterned paper. So you can always bring in more patterned paper. I like to design my mini one sheet wonders so that you don't have any scraps left over when you make all of your cuts. But if you are going to do what I've done, where you choose to use some additional pattern papers, then you still might be creating some scraps. But it's really great. You don't necessarily have to bring in pattern papers, because like my first card, I've used some solid color cardstock. It's also really good for, in particular with this sketch, if you die cut into your pattern papers or you just have some odd bits left over. This is going to be a really good scrap buster too. You can kind of get your main pattern from that first sheet and then just supplement it with whatever you happen to have in your stash, whether it's solid color cardstock, maybe it's an inky panel, maybe it's an embossed panel. So it's a really great way to just kind of use what you have. And I am going to add a matte layer underneath this panel. By the way, these panels have been cut to 4 inches wide by 5 1/4. And I like to glue everything onto this first panel to start, because then I can just kind of trim right along the edge of the panel, especially these little strips that I'm laying down. It's a really good way to kind of clean up that bottom edge and have a very distinct separation between the pattern at the top and the block of white at the bottom. And so with the matte layers underneath, I did die cut out from the center, because this is the heavier weight Spellbinders 100-pound solid color cardstock. I love this cardstock, and the colors just match this paper collection so perfectly. But it's not super expensive cardstock, but it's also not super inexpensive. So I do like to make it stretch a little bit further by just cutting out that center bit, so that, I mean, it's quite a fair amount, because there's not a lot of that border visible. So by cutting out from the center of it, no one's gonna know except you watching this. Certainly the card recipient won't know, because what I'm gonna do is I do fill in the center with just some plain old white cardstock. That way everything is still flush, everything is still nice and even, and you don't know that there's something missing out of the center. When I burnish, I'm not gonna get extra little burnish lines because of the different levels of cardstock. So it's just a way for you to, especially if you're using specialty paper, it's a way for you to kind of stretch your supplies a little bit further. Now for this third sketch, what I've done is, again, I've got a panel that is 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I am going to turn this so that it is landscape oriented. And then I'm going to put my 2 remaining pieces. Now these are both from that same first sheet that I cut down. And so I've got, this is where having double-sided pattern paper is really nice, because you can kind of use A side, B side, right? And you have the perfect complement, as you can see here. Now I did trim off this bit here, but I saved that so that I can actually use that behind my sentiment later, because it's almost very nearly a solid. It's got this really lovely, very subtle pattern to it, but it's going to be a great matte behind my sentiment banner. And so I'll again start with a matte layer that I've gutted out the middle of, but don't worry, I'll fill that back in with just some plain white cardstock to bring it up to level. And then on this one though, when I was looking at it, I did feel like I wanted to add an extra little strip of that really lovely dark blue, like a very dark navy blue, as a border even between the two pattern papers, not just at the bottom. So if you were going to do that, I would definitely recommend adhering this bit before you glue down the panel. That way you can trim exactly off the edge. But no worries if you need to do what I did, where you just put a little pencil mark and then you trim it to fit. That's going to work out great too. Now for my last card, I've got these last two pieces here, and those are the initial two triangles that I cut off from the 6x6 paper. So I've got another bit of pattern paper that I cut to 4 inches wide by 5 1/4, and you can actually have these triangle bits radiating from whichever corner you want. You could do it from the top, you could do it from the bottom. I've done it during my live stream. I did it one way, and then right after my live stream, I actually reversed it and had the radiating panels come out of the top right. So it's whatever you'd like. It works just as well in any of the 4 corners. But it's one thing. One of the things why I like to recommend using non-directional papers, because then you have all of that freedom. Because when I did that sketch during my live stream, I was using directional pattern papers, and in that case I was just cutting down some scraps, and it worked out not kind of conceptually to be the same, but probably not identical, because I was just cutting down whatever scraps I had left over. But it is a pattern that you could definitely have a lot more freedom with if you use non-directional papers. And now that I've got all 4 sketches as a base created, this last sort of third or so of my video will be actually completing each of those 4 cards. So at this point, you've seen me cut my 6x6 pattern paper down, so you've got all of the measurements for how to cut that. You've also seen me put together all 4 of the sketches, and this last portion of my video is just going to be how I'm choosing to decorate. So at this point, you could bring in anything else that you'd like to finish up your card. You could be crafting with ephemera if you wanted. I'm actually using this die set from the newly released Fresh Picked, and I think these are the daisies, and they're really fun. I actually die cut these out of some more of the pattern paper that I had left over, because I did cut into some additional pattern papers, so I decided to use those as well. And I've got, again, this is that piece, that little leftover bit that I trimmed off from the trapezoid of that tan color. That's the B side of the 6x6 that I used. So both of the pattern papers at the top, those were both from the original single sheet of pattern paper that I cut earlier. And as I mentioned, that's one of the benefits of using a double-sided pattern paper, because you can mix and match, where I've used 2 pieces, and so really great to give you some options there. And I did save the little bit that I trimmed off, and this is from the Cheers to You Better Press collection, is where I've got the sentiments from. And that set had, I think it was a handful or so of sentiments that you could better press out in one go, and then it had a coordinating die that cuts them out in one go. Love that. So efficient. I have tons of sentiments, and in a nice assortment of colors too. So that's really cool. This die set, this freshly picked die set, now, initially, I think on my first card, what I did was I used these flower petals turned upwards. And I think you could actually use them. I think they're designed to be turned downwards so that the petals are kind of drooping downward. And then the center of the flower is actually pointed upwards. But I think it looks fine with the flower petals pointed upwards too. So I kind of feel like you can use those however you'd like. Because in any case, I feel like it's a very almost abstract flower, and so I think it works in any direction. And I initially was going to again do like a little cluster of several of these flowers, but at the end of the day I decided I'm actually just going to keep this particular focal image nice and simple, and I thought I would give it a try to see how it would look as it was designed, where I've taken those petals that have sort of those droopy petals and have them actually droop downwards. And so you can use, there's 2 layering dies for the center of the flowers so that you can have a little bit of shadow, a little bit of highlight by layering the 2 pieces. And it's nice because one die will cut out all of, the bottom layer, and then you have a second die that cuts out all of the top layer. That way you can cut out loads of these flowers and assemble them pretty quickly. And then I've just chosen some, these are going to be cut from the same paper rose pattern paper. And so I've got those layered up as just a different way of kind of assembling these flowers. I think this is the way it's designed to look. It's just different to how I originally saw them in my head. Because I normally don't think of flower petals drooping downwards. I usually think of them as kind of springing upwards. But I like the look of this. It's pretty cool. And I will do a close-up look at all of 4 cards. I know I'm sort of speeding through all of this because it is going to be a rather lengthy video, because I did not want to speed up the actual cutting process, and I did want to show creating all of the sketches, but also completing the cards too. So for my next 2 cards, I have decided to use the Propagation Garden collection as my focal area, but I did bring in this sealed wildflowers set because there's a lot of different sort of die sets with flowers. There's some abstract flowers. There's some different types of flowers in the sealed sort of die set and collection anyways. And what's great about them is that they have these really long stems, which makes it perfect for tucking them into these beakers, which I thought would be really fun. And the beakers themselves are really neat. There's a lot of detail there, because there's one die that will help you to cut out, if you wanted some liquid inside your beaker, you can cut that out from using one die. There's another die that gives you the beaker, itself. And there's even a die that cuts out the little, markings for, how much volume, if you're measuring with the beaker. You've got those little tick marks as a die, and you even have another die that cuts out the base of, I think it's just 3 of the beakers, like the larger ones that have like a little bit more of a substantial base to them. So you've got a die that cuts out those pieces too, and they're all different. So those 3 are on a single die, but if you kind of move them around to the different bases of your beakers, you'll find the one that matches. So the way that I'm layering up my beaker is that I die cut the actual beaker jar out of vellum. I kind of like the look of that sort of frosted glass look. And then because vellum's kind of tricky, if you put adhesive behind vellum, it's going to look, where you've got adhesive, it's going to look a little bit different to where you don't have any adhesive. And I know Cordelia suggested an adhesive tape runner that unfortunately is no longer available on Amazon. So what I've done is die cut from a sheet of double-sided adhesive, and I'm going to line this entire die cut with adhesive. So the only reason why, putting little bits of adhesive here and there looks a little bit or can look a little bit off is because if you have a mix of some places that have adhesive and some places that don't have any adhesive, then it'll look a little bit off. But if your whole thing is lined with adhesive, then everything looks the same. So that's a one way around if you don't have like a good place to hide your glue as you glue down your adhesive, then just put glue everywhere. So that it all looks consistent. And so the next thing that I'll do in that same sealed wildflower set, there are some really lovely, just small little dainty flower buds. I've die cut that out of some of the dark navy blue solid color cardstock, but I've also die cut it out of some of the pattern papers that I had left over so that it's really like a perfect match with the papers and the colors in this this collection. And I'll link to it if it's still available. It is Paper Rose, which Spellbinders carries now. But if I can't find it at Spellbinders anymore, I do know that there are other places where you can buy Paper Rose. I think scrapbook.com has it, and as well Craft Stash carries Paper Rose. So then now we are onto my fourth and final card. So I'm going to start this card off with a circle. So again, this is where, if you weren't overly precise with your cuts, you can kind of see where I'm covering quite a fair bit of these angled triangle pieces. And in any case, just depending on the angles that you wanted to line these up, if you didn't get those original cuts exactly at, 1 and 13/16 inch inwards, it's totally okay because you, like, at least for one of these, I trimmed off that wider edge of it. So this is where I say that, I'm giving you some pretty precise measurements in my cutting guide, but when you go to actually do your cuts, if you don't have to stress about getting it absolutely dead on perfect. It's okay if it's a little bit off because these sketches, they're so asymmetric in nature that it really won't matter too much. This circle that I'm going to start off with, I just have a basic set of circle nested dies from Spellbinders, and I layered white on top of this really lovely, I think it's Dune is a color cardstock that I'm using from from Spellbinders. And so I'll start with a different shaped beaker for this one, but it layers up the exact same. So you have one die that cuts out the liquid, one die that cuts out the beaker itself, and then another die that gives you the base of your beaker, and then you've got that additional detailing of all of the little measurement lines, those little tick marks along the side. So really fun. I just love all of the attention to detail on these little beakers, and all of the sentiments that I used for the these last two cards are from a sentiment stamp set that is part of this collection. So there's lots of nice kind of punny sentiments to go along with it, all to do with growth and flowers and whatnot. So really, really lovely. This, on my previous card, I used the sentiment big things often have small beginnings, which is really lovely. And for this card, I have this, I love the kind of scripty combination of the different fonts here. But this one says, "You grow, girl," which I think is really fun. And I've used some of, again, the same little dainty flowers, again, also die cut from the pattern papers that I had left over. And I'm using my Kalau 3D glue gel to adhere these so that there's just like a little bit of dimension. I find this a lot easier than trying to get foam behind these little itty bitty flowers, but I even use my 3D glue gel for larger pieces too, just because it's just so much easier to squirt out a bit of glue than it is to sometimes cut down foam. So I've got that, and then I've got my sentiment here, which I thought would be fun to also put in a set of nested circles, just because kind of has that sort of shape to it already, so it fits very nicely in a little circle. And the other great thing with using your 3D glue gel is, especially for the sentiment that I have here, part of it I do want to overlap over top of that larger circle, and then part of it's going to go over the panel that I created with that radiating pattern. But everything's at such different levels. You know, some have one layer of cardstock, some has two, some has three, and some have four. So that's the nice thing about using a glue gel. You can kind of just push it down very gently until it feels kind of level to you, and then give it adequate time to completely dry and get hard, and it will hold that dimension. You just don't want to smush it down before it's had a chance to dry. And I'm going to finish off this card with, I think these are some wax dots that I made from leftover wax seal creations. So here's a final look at all 4 of my cards. I really hope that you enjoy this mini one sheet wonder. This is number 9. It's available for free for all of my channel members at the moment. At the 99-cent crafty friend level, you always have access to my most recent mini one sheet wonder, and at the time of my recording this, number 9 is the most recent. Just check the member tab for the perk that describes, free printables, and there'll be a link where you can pop on over and download the printable. For my Love You Latte and higher channel members, you have access to my full archive of mini one sheet wonder printables, so you always have access to that so long as you are a channel member at the $4.99 level and higher. And if you don't want to become a channel member, totally okay. You can still get my mini one sheet wonder if you'd like to have a printable. It is available on my website for purchase. It is only $1.50. It's a digital purchase, so you will get it instantly. You'll be able to download it and print it off as many times as you'd like. I only ask that you don't share it or send that printable or file to your friends. It doesn't cost a lot, so I'd rather, if you want, you can share the link, and that way they can purchase it themselves. But always, this video is free, and I've gone through the whole cutting guide, assembly of the sketches, and created 4 complete cards. So you can always rewatch this video, you can pause it where you need, you can rewatch the sections that you need. This video will always be free for everybody. Thanks again. I'll leave links to everything in the description box below, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day.